the one thing that really fascinated me about your research, and this was more about older humans, was essentially the female intrasexual competition and how, I suppose, under discussed this subject is, because I think in the culture, women are always presented as these innocent, wonderful, fluffy, and loving creatures, but that's not quite the truth. So, what can you tell us about female intrasexual competition?
Okay, so I think that's the kind of corollary to my saying how cooperative boys can be. The other thing that I, started learning about when I made my original observations as a doctoral student was how much girls are constantly trying to figure out, how to deal with the other girls there. And of course, women too. And I've done a lot of studies on that. And why on earth shouldn't females compete just like males? Doesn't even make any sense. And I think the age old argument is an evolutionary biological argument that, oh, well, males, they can have lots of different females, so therefore they should compete with each other so they can be the most successful. And females, well, there's always somebody to inseminate them, whatever species you're talking about, so they don't need to compete. But in fact, when it comes to getting food and when it comes to getting shelter, and I'm not just talking about humans now, right? Females got to figure this out. And now it turns out the newest research is showing, oh, females actually benefit from having more than one mate. Females do benefit in different ways, and it depends on the species. And of course, humans are more pair bonded than they are polygynous or polyandrous. So usually there's marriage, usually between a man and a woman. That's how our bonding system goes. So that means both men and women are competing for a mate, right? Especially if you're not going to have that many other ones. And if you're talking about our modern birth control societies, well, we might be competing for sexual partners. And so there's a lot of things that we finally realize women are competing for all the time. And girls certainly know this. The problem is, or the way I frame it, is that girls don't compete in the way that boys do. So this kind of came to me most clearly, like maybe 2 years ago, I wrote a paper on this. What you see with boys is what we call contest. So very easy. It's like, who's going to get that ball? Well, I'm going to hit you over the head and I'm going to take it from you, right? I'm actually going to contest it. Or if you think about football, whichever, whether that's soccer here or actually, football in Europe or American football or basketball, it's literally grabbing something or pushing somebody away or whatever the rules permit and letting you triumph, right? Letting you beat them. And it's very direct. And so this is what boys and men love. They love to do that. And with girls in sports, you're getting a little bit more of that, but there's usually rules that prevent it from being exactly the same. So there's to minimize the damage, because more females are much more concerned about protecting themselves. And there's a lot of research that I've done on that. But anyway, but girls then, how do they get what they want? And that's a big question. So I have this ongoing study of this now where we put together two girls and we say, okay, you can choose stickers from a box. So go ahead. But there's only room for one child to choose them. There's plenty for both, but there's not that many, there's 6 to choose from. So they can each choose 2. So how do you figure that out? Oh, wow. This is a big problem for girls because they both go up there. Sometimes they go up there holding hands, but only one can fit. So what do you do? And this is something that girls do not like. And I don't like it either, right? I don't like having to go head to head or push somebody out of the way. Sometimes girls will put their arm out, and these are 4 and 5-year-olds, and push the other away, but very subtly and kind of looking up like, oh, it's not me doing this. But more often it's like, well, maybe we can work out a plan at 4 or 5 years of age. Maybe you should go first, second. So then I can go first here, and then second, you can go first. And it's like a very convoluted way of reasoning it. And it's a lot of effort paid to this. And so the way I talk about, and this is based on the non-human animal literature, the way I talk about female competition is what they call scramble competition. And I know that sounds really odd, but it's the idea that instead of having face-to-face blows or a contest, what you do is you go off quietly and try to outdo the other one. So what does that look like? Well, if it's you're talking about children who are in school, you try to get the best grades, and then maybe you don't say anything about it, so they don't come after you, other girls, and make fun of you because you're doing so well. No, you might say, oh, that was so hard, I don't think I did well, and then you don't say it if you got a perfect score. Or when it comes to the mate market, you might try to find a male, not when there are other females around and you have to compete by looking prettier or sounding sweeter or whatever is the value in that culture that you're supposed to do. You go off by yourself and try to track down the guy where he might be, and you don't have to engage in that competition. And so, I find it very funny because I was living in a little town in upstate New York here in America, and they had a dress list for the prom. So they had to make sure that no two girls going to the same high school prom wore the same dress, because that would be no good. So the girls would come in maybe with a friend, but only with, one or two others, oftentimes with their family, their mothers. And they would try to get the prettiest dress, right? The idea is to have the prettiest dress, right? And to make sure nobody else has it. And so, but that's done not with, oh my gosh, there's somebody else in the dress store and I'm going to kick her out so I can grab that dress from her. That would be a contest over the dress. But rather, I'm going to go there where nobody else is there, make sure I get the best possible dress. And then everybody will look at me and say, wow. And we all do that. I'm totally guilty of that myself when I was younger or whatever. Or we try to get the best house or the best car. And I recently, published a study showing that, even women get very upset with other women who have things that typically women don't care about, like territory, or a car. And they really don't like it more than men don't like it. So if a guy has a great car, the other guys were more likely to say, wow, as opposed to, no, I don't like that. And the girls were like, a great car. And these are the women mostly because they're young. They're older. Sorry, they're not so young. And it was like, wow, I was so surprised at the number of things, being on a city council or having a really pretty garden or being able to do things, whatever skills I asked about. The women invariably were more upset about it with other women than men were with other men. So it's there early in life. It's there all the way through. As far as I know, I now visit my mother. She's in assisted living, and the women are having fights all the time about who gets to sit with who and who's friends with who. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's nasty. It is really nasty. And it's mostly women because women outlive men. And it's very interesting, very funny. I probably shouldn't say this given things in the United States right now, but they played the debate was last night between Biden and Trump, and people have very strong feelings in this country about that. Well, they refused to play it at my mother's assisted living facility because they were afraid it would actually come to blows. So everybody had to be in their own room with their own TV. Usually they have, public movies, and they try to get they do things and have kids come and sing, and everybody comes, and all kinds of lovely events. They bring dogs, but oh no, I was like, they're not going to show it to you. So, we had to get my mother online through using her computer and putting it on for her so she could watch it all by herself. So it's quite nasty. So I can attest that from as early as I look at kids all the way through the end of life, women are very competitive, but it's usually not in contests. It's usually going off and saying, I want you to be my friend and not be friends with her, subtly, or finding something they want, whether it's a house or a dress or a man or whatever it is, or a friend, quietly when nobody else is there. And the language is very subtle that girls and women use to compete. It might be even just gestures that boys and men, as I mentioned, wouldn't even notice.